Hello and welcome viewers. You are watching Amara TV from Amara Media Corporation. Just here I am talking about what has happened before around 120 years. Just in that time, we know that in Ethiopian calendar in 1888 there was a battle of Adwa. In this battle, the well-trained of the colonial soldiers of Italy were deported into Ethiopia to battle against the Black Army. This Black Army was Ethiopians who stand against the colonial power. It is known that before the victory of Adwa, all battles which takes place between the Europeans and the other parts like Asians, like Australia, in America and Africa, every battle was dominated by the European power. But the victory of Adwa bring different history. It turned this history upside down. And today I am joined by a guest from Wollo University. He is lecturer of history, and here I have Dr. Alemayehu Warqiun. I would like to say welcome.
Thank you very much.
What is your personal emotion towards having the sense of Adwa inside yourself?
I feel a sense of pride and heroism because as you stated that no country has defeated the Europeans in the same period. That was why we are celebrating Adwa every year. You know, Adwa is very exceptional historical achievement. It was only in Ethiopia that such kind of the victory was done. So that was why I am feeling a sense of pride and heroism.
It turned the world history upside down. There were no any other power that defeated Europeans before the victory of Adwa. It was just like considered as a natural law to every battle was dominated by the European. But this is another history. What was the implication to the world?
The battle of the victory of the Ethiopians at Adwa is unexceptional because it has changed the colonial mentality in the then period. Because in the same time, every black citizen was considered to be as a servant of the white. And again, the blacks living throughout the world has been highly exploited, and they were considered to be as the servants of the world, as the servants of the whites. So it was the Ethiopian victory at Adwa that has changed this colonial mentality, because many of the blacks living throughout the world had drawn a very good lesson from the Ethiopian victory at Adwa. In the first place, it pushed blacks living throughout the world to fight for freedom and equality. And again, it had created a sense of political consciousness among the black world. The Ethiopian victory at Adwa had become a global agenda because such victory had never done in another parts of the world. So the Ethiopian victory at Adwa had changed the European colonial mentality because it was a time that the blacks had made the first history at Adwa. And taking the lesson from the Ethiopian victory at Adwa, blacks living throughout the world started an anti-colonial struggle. To begin with, you know, it was after the Ethiopian victory at Adwa, the Pan-Africanism was started. You know, Pan-Africanism, which was primarily started by the African descendants living in the Caribbean world, who had been under the yoke of the white domination. They started resistance against racism. When we come to Africa,
yeah, other
many
countries
of
get
the
independence.
African countries
Yeah.
started an anti-colonial struggle very widely. You know, Adwa is not only our victory, but also the victory of the blacks living throughout the world. That's what I have.
When you come to the very genesis of the victory of Adwa, how the cause began and finally went to war, and Ethiopia made a significant victory over the colonial power.
The Treaty of Zauchale was not the basic factor. It's what I can say, a deep-rooted factor. Rather, it's an immediate cause, what we call it now in Amharic, sabab. The basic factor for the victory, for the outbreak of the Battle of the Adwa was the Italian colonial aspiration over Ethiopia. The last decade of the 19th century and the early years of the 20th century is really the age of the colonialism. In the second half of the 19th century, that many of the European powers started the colonial conquest in Africa. In the meantime, as what other European countries such as Britain, England and Germany had been doing, Italy had developed very strong colonial interest over the Horn of Africa. So in the meantime, Italy was doing its best to conquest Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, and again Libya. So its basic factor for the outbreak of the Battle of Adwa was the Italian colonial interest, aspiration over Ethiopia. To this end, the Italians had been doing very different things very aggressively. One of the techniques that they put on the ground was using deceptive treaties.
Yes, deceiving the Ethiopian emperor.
Deceptive treaties. Yeah. What we call it now, a kind of a cheating approach.
Yeah.
So that in 1889 in European calendar, the Europeans, that is the Italian delegate, the so-called Pietro Antonelli, signed a treaty of Wuchale at Wollo. And this treaty was basically written in two languages.
Yeah.
That was in Italian language and in Amharic language. Basically, later on it was translated into French language.
Okay.
You know, the version written in Amharic and Italian language was contradicting each other. The version written in Italian language says that Ethiopia can ask the help of Italy in its relation with European countries. You know, it's an optional.
In Amharic.
Yeah, it's an optional.
In Amharic, yes.
Yeah, it's optional. Yeah. Whereas the version written in Italian language contains the, what I can say, it was an obligatory. Mandatory, yeah. Obligatory. Yes. It says that Ethiopia can contact with other European countries based on the goodwill of the Italian government. Yeah. You know, it limited the Ethiopian interest on, to the extent of dependency on the Italian government. As a result, these two versions had created the conflicting interests between Ethiopia and Italy.
It brings the situation tense.
Yeah. In the meantime, the Ethiopian government had identified the Italian diplomatic cheating and requested the Italian government to recorrect the version. But the Italian government gave the emperor defer, and it was not ready to recorrect the version. As a result, the conflicting interests reached its climax stage, and the Ethiopian government had finally declared the proclamation which was requesting the Ethiopian government, the Ethiopian people to defend the sovereignty and the interest of the state. And finally, it led us into to the outbreak of the Battle of Zadwa.
Yeah, we will come to this point. Okay. The war, the conflict, the actual war. There was a trial in diplomatic ways how King Menelik was wise enough to manage this kind of diplomatic ties and diplomatic situations. Can we talk on this point?
The emperor declared the proclamation at the last. But before that, the emperor had done its best to settle the problem peacefully. In the first place, the Ethiopian government, especially Empress Taitu, repeatedly requested Antonio Leti recorrect the Italian version.
One of the spy of the Italian government.
An instrumental personalities behind the signing of the Wuchale Treaty and cheating the Ethiopian government.
Oh.
He was responsible for that. Empress Taitu repeatedly requested Antonio Leti to recorrect the version. but he was not ready to act accordingly. Again, the Ethiopian government, Emperor Minilik, sent a delegation to Rome led by Rast Makonnan to deal on that subject. But the Italian government was not ready. Again, the Ethiopian government had notified its position to the European powers to know the Italian diplomatic cheating. Again, they gave the Emperor defer. Finally, in 1993, the Emperor officially abrogated the Treaty of Wuchale because it was against of the Ethiopian national interest. Because it reduced the Ethiopian sovereignty to the status of the protectorate. Lastly, in 1996, after ending all the patiences and ending all the options, the Emperor issued the proclamation which was requesting the Ethiopian people to stand together against the Italian government. And this was what I can say, the peaceful ways followed by the Emperor to settle the problem very peacefully.
How was the response that the people of Ethiopia and different rulers has given for the decree made by Emperor Minilik?
It gives me comfort to examine the response of the Ethiopian people in the then period. The Emperor declared the proclamation in the meantime that Ethiopia had never completed its state formation process. Or in another meaning, Italy invaded Ethiopia when the Ethiopian government was moving fastly to finalize state formation process. The Emperor declared this statement even before Ethiopia completed its state formation process, what we call it now in Amharic, Hagere Mengist Gimbata. So in the meantime, the Ethiopian people positively accepted the call from every corner of the country, accepting the call very positively, marched to Adwa. So I can conclude that the Ethiopian people positively accepted the call and ready to die for the love of Ethiopia. You know, one of a wise approach of the Emperor can be seen in his statement. The statement is what I can say very carefully designed. It considers the time, and again it considers the emotion of the people.
The psychological makeup of the people at that time.
Yeah, the psychological makeup of the people. You know, the call was generally positively accepted by the people, and leaving the difference aside, the Ethiopian people stood together to defend their common enemy. I can give you one best example. You know, in the meantime, one of the provincial leader named Wagshum Gwangul was revolted against the Emperor in the meantime. But when he saw the people were marching to Adwa, he was what I can say surprised. And putting the stone on his back, he went to
Minilik.
Minilik. Yeah. And he requested him to give the mercy. Automatically the Emperor...
In order to participate in the war.
Yeah. The Emperor gave him the mercy, and finally Wagshum Gwangul had been part of this campaign, and he did a great history. And this shows that although the difference had been, in the meantime, they left the difference aside. They stood together, and they were ready to die for the common purpose or for the common goal.
When we see the actual war, I think it is step-by-step victory. They made the victory in Ambalagi, then to Mekelle. The main fort was controlled by the Ethiopian power through techniques, and then they go to Adwa and they have victory. Let's see this fronts point by point.
The Battle of Ambalagi was basically fought in 1895 European calendar. You know, although Ethiopian government was positively asking the Italian government, it was not ready to accept every request. Pushing the Ethiopian request, the Italian government was penetrating into the interior part of Ethiopia. Then it was responsibility of the Ethiopian people in the government to defend these aggressors. Finally, in 1895, the Ethiopian people led by Fitaurari Gabeya crushed the Italian forces at Ambalagi. It was very great history. It was very great victory.
Yeah.
It was very great victory. Again, in 1896, the Italian government was already in control of Mekelle and its environs. The Ethiopian government was using different techniques. You know, in the meantime, the Ethiopian forces led by Taitu herself and Ras Mokonnon had encircled the Italian forces landed in Mekelle.
Yeah.
You know, before opening the fires against the Italians, the Ethiopian army tried the different techniques. They prefer to use other options. Immediately, the Ethiopian army controlled a very small stream where the Italian government had been, the Italian army had been using as a source of the water.
Yeah.
One of a mastermind behind this technique was Taitu. I would like to repeat it. A mastermind behind this military strategy was Empress Taitu.
The wife of King
the wife
Menelik.
of Emperor Menelik.
Yeah.
Eventually, the Italian army landed in Mekelle and its environs faced the shortage of the water. Because of this, they presented the peaceful withdrawal from the areas that they occupied.
They were the main fortress that the Italian powers built.
Yes. You know, because of acute shortage of the water, the Italian army were landed in Mekelle and its environs, left the area without the confrontation. Lastly, in 1896, in March 1896, the final battle was fought, which had upside down the world. The war that had upside down the world.
Whenever we think of Adwa, the psychological makeup that gives for the present generation is very prominent. Just we can see in the present past, we can remember that the Tigray invaders occupied some places in Amhara and Afar. The people in Amhara and all over Ethiopia stand together to fight, to have victory over these invaders. Is that the connection between the sense of never give up in Adwa is currently presented in this?
It has very strong connection with the Ethiopian victory at Adwa, and again the Ethiopian victory during the 5 years of the Italian occupation period, and again the Ethiopian victory at Karamara. This is the value, or what I can say, a heroic sentiment that the Ethiopian successive generations inherited from their forefathers. You know, nowadays, the TPLF evils are doing their best to divide up Ethiopia ethnically and other ways.
By the way, this technique is the same as what Italians has done.
Yes, of course.
Like divide and conquer style.
Yeah. You know, in Amharic, ሲኦልም ቢሆን ገብተን እስከ ኢትዮጵያን እናፈርሳለን. They were saying this statement. However, their plan became nightmares. It's limited to only their aspiration. It is this generation that limited this TPLF's evil mentality. It is this generation who is on the verge to bury the Italian evil-minded mentality. This a sense of heroism, a sense of pride, is not an overnight achievement. It is a psychological makeup that the successive Ethiopian generations had acquired from their forefathers.
It transfers from generation to generation.
You know, in its long history, Ethiopians had sacrificed a lot. Several Ethiopians had died, not only at Adwa, but also at Metemma, at Mekdala, at Karamera, and again in many other battles. So this is what I can say, the psychological makeup or the sense of the heroism that the successive Ethiopian generations are inheriting through a passage of time. So the present sentiment that everybody is looking upon the existing generation is the direct reflection of the Ethiopian victory at Adwa, and again during the 5 years of the Italian occupation, and later on at Karamera.
The victory of Adwa is not only an asset for Ethiopians, but it is an asset for the African people. How can it should be preserved and transferred to the generation to come? So if you have suggestion regarding to this, if you have some points you want to transfer for Ethiopians and for Africans and for other people who want to promote the victory of Adwa, let me give you some time.
We are talking that Ethiopia is an exceptional country that had never been under the yoke of the colonialism. This is very great thing. This is a history that would never be erased throughout the passage of the time. That will continue throughout the generation. You know, in the first place, the Ethiopian victory at Adwa had kept the Ethiopian national interest. Nowadays, we do have different languages, diverse culture, diverse religion, and the like. This would not be practical, or this would not be true if Ethiopians were defeated at Adwa. We do have different cultures. We do have different religion. If Menelik was not in his position, we may not get this celebrating Adwa without giving a credit to Menelik is meaningless. The existing generation should have to give a much credit to Empress Taitu and Menelik, because we may not have our culture, we may not have our language, we may not have our identity if Menelik failed to defend the Italians at Adwa, because what Europeans had done in Africa would have been repeated in our country. You know, we have to give a credit to the emperor. Let us leave other things aside alone. We have to give a credit, we have to give a due credit to the emperor and his the then generation who were ready to die and who were died for the love of the country. So the first place is that we should have to give a credit to the emperor and the generation who were in time and place. Secondly, we should have to know our history properly. Because if you don't know your history, you may not have your future plan. The existing generation should have to clearly know the history, examine the history, and choose the right way to maintain the interest of the country and ways to living together.
Lecturer of History at Wallo University, Dr. Alemayehu Erkiun, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you again.
Dear viewers, you are watching our special program in connection with the victory of Adwa. Thank you for your time. Stay with other programs which will be broadcast from Amara Media Corporation. See you.